Stop for a moment, before you scroll again, before you move on to the next thing. Just stay here, because this feeling you've been carrying, it's not random. That quiet, that silence, that space where you expected answers but didn't get them. You've been wondering about it, haven't you? You've asked questions. You've waited. You've tried to understand why it feels like God hasn't been speaking the way He used to. And maybe you didn't say it out loud, but you felt it. Where are you? Not in anger, not in rebellion, just honestly. Because there was a time when things felt clear, when you felt guided, when you felt close. And now, it feels different, quieter, slower, almost like something has paused. And you've been trying to figure out if that means something is wrong, if you did something, if something changed. But what if I told you, this silence you're feeling is not distance? What if it's something else entirely? Stay with me, because before you assume anything, you need to understand what's really happening here. The first thing you need to understand is this: silence does not mean absence. But I know that's not how it feels to you right now. Because when you're in the middle of it, when prayers feel like they go unanswered, when direction feels unclear, silence feels like distance. It feels like something has been pulled away, like something that used to be close is now far. And you've been trying to make sense of that feeling. You've gone back over things in your mind, wondering if you missed something, if you made a wrong step, if you slowly drifted without realizing it. But let's slow this down for a moment, because what you're experiencing right now is not unfamiliar. There have always been moments like this, moments where everything becomes quieter, where what used to feel obvious no longer feels as clear. And in those moments, your first instinct is to question yourself, to wonder what changed, to wonder if you're still on the right path. But what if the question isn't, what did you do wrong? What if the question is, what is happening beneath the silence? Because silence is not empty. It just feels that way when you don't yet understand it. And right now, you're standing in a moment that feels quiet. But it is not inactive. Something is happening here, something you can't fully see yet. And before you try to fill the silence or escape it, you need to understand it. Because what you're experiencing right now is not rejection, it's not distance, and it's not God stepping away from you. It's something much quieter than that, something that doesn't force your attention, but changes you if you stay in it long enough. You've been used to clarity, to moments where things made sense, where direction felt obvious, where you could feel movement. And now that things feel still, your mind is trying to interpret that stillness as a problem. But stillness is not a problem. It just feels uncomfortable when you're not used to it, because stillness removes distraction. It removes noise. It removes the constant feedback that tells you what's happening next. And when all of that is gone, you're left with something deeper, something more honest. You're left with yourself, with your thoughts, with your questions, with the parts of you that are harder to ignore when everything else gets quiet. And that's why this moment feels heavier than it looks. Because it's not just silence around you. It's silence that's revealing something within you. Things you've been pushing aside. Things you've been delaying. Things you didn't have to face when everything was louder. And now, you're noticing them. Not because something is wrong, but because something is being brought to the surface. This silence is not empty. It's uncovering. And that's the part most people don't stay for. Because uncovering is uncomfortable. It's easier to move, to distract yourself, to fill the silence with noise so you don't have to sit with what's rising up. But you didn't do that. You stayed. And that matters more than you realize. Because when everything gets quiet, what surfaces is usually what needs your attention most. Not what's urgent, what's honest. The thoughts you've been avoiding, the questions you didn't want to answer, the small nudges you felt, but ignored. They don't shout, they wait, and silence is where they finally get heard. You may have noticed it already, how certain things keep coming back to your mind. Not loudly, not aggressively, just consistently. The same awareness, the same tension, the same quiet sense that something needs to shift. And you've been trying to figure out if that's just your thoughts or something deeper. But here's the truth. What is real doesn't need to force you. It stays. It returns. It doesn't disappear just because you look away from it for a while. And that's what's happening right now. This silence isn't leaving you empty. It's holding space for what you've been avoiding to finally be seen. Not to overwhelm you, but to make things clear. Because clarity doesn't always come through answers. Sometimes it comes through what refuses to leave your awareness. And that's where you are now. Not lost, not disconnected, just aware in a deeper way than before. And awareness changes things, even if nothing around you has shifted yet. Something inside you has. Because once you start noticing what's been there all along, you can't go back to not seeing it. That's why this moment feels different, not louder, not clearer in the way you expected, but deeper, more personal, more real. You're no longer just asking for direction. You're beginning to recognize what's already been shown. And that can feel unsettling at first, because it removes the idea that you're waiting for something new and replaces it with the realization that something has been waiting on you, not to rush, not to perform, but to respond. And that's where the tension comes from. Not confusion, but hesitation. Because you're starting to see that this silence hasn't been about missing guidance. It's been about sitting with what you already know. The step you've been circling around, the conversation you've been delaying, the change you've been thinking about but not acting on. It hasn't disappeared. It's just been quiet, waiting. And silence gives it space to stay in front of you long enough to be recognized. That's why you feel this pressure, not external pressure, internal clarity, the kind that doesn't push you, but doesn't leave you either. And now, you're at the point where you can no longer say, I don't know, because you do. Even if you don't fully understand it yet, you recognize it, and recognition always leads to a choice. And this is where it becomes real. Not overwhelming, not dramatic, just real. Because now it's no longer about understanding what's happening. It's about what you're going to do with it. You've felt it, you've recognized it. You've sat in this quiet long enough to know. This isn't random. This isn't nothing. And now there's a shift, a subtle one, but important. You're no longer asking, why is this happening? You're beginning to ask, what is this asking of me? And that question changes everything, because it moves you from waiting to responding, not in a rushed way, not in a pressured way, but in an honest way. You're starting to see that this silence wasn't holding you back. It was holding something in front of you, something you didn't have space to fully see before. And now that you do, you can't ignore it the same way, not because you're forced to act, but because pretending not to notice it anymore doesn't feel true. And truth has a way of settling in quietly like that. It doesn't demand. It doesn't shout. It simply stays. until you decide what to do with it. So now you're here, not stuck, not lost, just standing in a moment that's asking for honesty. And the next step isn't about having everything figured out. It's about being willing to respond to what you already see. And response doesn't always look the way you expect. It's not always loud. It's not always immediate. Sometimes it's quiet. A small decision. A subtle shift. A moment where you stop avoiding what you already know. And that's where most people hesitate, because big changes feel clear. But small, honest steps, they require something deeper. They require willingness. You don't need to solve everything right now. You don't need to have every answer. You don't need to see the entire path ahead. You only need to stop pretending that you don't recognize what's in front of you. Because you do, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it feels uncertain, even if part of you wishes it would just disappear so that you don't have to deal with it. It hasn't disappeared. It stayed. And the fact that it stayed means it matters. Not because it's forcing you, but because it's inviting you. And invitations are different from pressure. They don't push. They don't overwhelm. They simply wait. And you're standing in that waiting space right now, aware, present, no longer able to say you didn't notice. And that awareness is enough. Enough to begin. Enough to take one step. Enough to respond honestly instead of delaying again. Because the moment you stop resisting, things begin to move. Not all at once, but enough to show you. You were never stuck to begin with. And when things begin to move, it doesn't always feel dramatic. There's no sudden rush, no instant clarity about everything ahead. Just a shift, a quiet one, but real. You'll notice it in small ways, in how your thoughts feel less tangled, in how decisions don't feel as heavy as they did before, in how something inside you feels lighter, not because everything is solved, but because you're no longer holding back what you already knew. That's what changes things. Not perfection, not certainty. Honesty. You stopped pretending. You stopped delaying. You stopped telling yourself you needed more time, when deep down you knew you were ready to face it. And that kind of honesty creates movement. Not forced movement, natural movement. Like something that was waiting for your agreement, finally has it. You may not see the full result yet. You may not feel completely confident. But you will notice this: you're no longer stuck in the same place mentally. You're not circling the same thoughts. You're not replaying the same questions over and over again. Because once you respond, the silence changes. It's no longer holding tension. It becomes space. Space where clarity can grow. Space where direction can unfold. Space where you're no longer trying to figure everything out at once. You're simply moving forward, one step at a time. And that's enough. More than enough. So now, just pause for a moment. Not to think harder, not to figure something new out, but to notice where you are right now. Because this moment, this quiet clarity you're feeling, this sense that something has shifted inside you, it didn't come from nowhere. It came from your willingness to stay, to listen, to be honest. And that matters more than you realize. You didn't need louder answers. You didn't need something dramatic to happen. You just needed to see what was already there, and now you do. So as you move forward from here, don't try to hold on to a feeling. Don't try to recreate this exact moment. Just stay in the same posture, honest, aware, willing. Because what changed here wasn't your situation, it was your response. And response is what moves everything forward. even when it's quiet, even when it's slow, even when no one else can see it. So go gently, not rushing, not forcing, just continuing from this place where silence no longer feels empty. It feels understood, and that changes everything.